Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Foundation Cracks. Robert Mitchell had built his empire from nothing. At 52, he owned 3 successful construction companies, a portfolio of rental properties, and investments that most men could only dream of. His hands, scarred from years of manual labor before he became the boss, still carried the calluses that reminded him where he came from. The penthouse office overlooking downtown gave him a view of half the buildings his companies had erected, but tonight, those same hands trembled as he stared at the photographs spread across his mahogany desk. Tracy, his wife of 23 years, wrapped in the arms of Dylan Pierce, her personal trainer. The images were crystal clear, taken through the window of their lake house, the one Rob had bought her for their 15th anniversary. The same house where they conceived their youngest, Kevin. The irony wasn't lost on him. Rob's private investigator, Tommy Russo, sat across from him, chain-smoking despite the no-smoking policy. Tommy was an ex-cop who'd lost his badge for being too aggressive, but his methods got results. "How long?" Rob asked, his voice steady despite the rage building inside him. 6 months, maybe longer. Your wife's been real careful about covering her tracks, but Pierce? He's sloppy. Thinks with the wrong head. Tommy tapped ash into Rob's crystal paperweight. Neighbor security cameras caught them at least a dozen times. "Want me to dig deeper?" Rob studied the timeline Tommy had constructed. Tracy's sudden interest in fitness, her weekend trips to visit her sister, the way she'd become distant and critical of everything he did. It all made sense now. But what cut deepest wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the calculation behind it. Tracy had been planning this for months, maybe years. "What about the kids?" Rob asked. Tommy shifted uncomfortably. "Amanda knows. Has for a while. She's been covering for your wife, even gave her alibi for some of the meetups. Kevin, he's clueless, but he'd probably side with Mom if it came to light. You know how these custody battles go." The words hit Rob like a physical blow. His daughter, his princess, the one he'd walked down the aisle just 3 years ago, had been complicit in this betrayal. Amanda, who'd asked him for $50,000 for her wedding, who still called him daddy when she wanted something, had been stabbing him in the back. Rob closed the folder and looked out at the city lights. 23 years of marriage, 2 children, a life built on what he thought was solid ground. But the foundation had been rotting from the inside. "I want everything," Rob said finally. "Bank records, phone logs, credit card statements. Every hotel, every restaurant, every lie." And Tommy, he turned to face the investigator, and Tommy saw something in Rob's eyes that made him nervous. "Find out what Pierce values most. Everyone has pressure points." After Tommy left, Rob sat alone in his office until dawn. He didn't go home that night or the next. Instead, he began making calls to lawyers, accountants, and a few other professionals whose services weren't advertised in the yellow pages. By the time Tracy noticed his absence, Rob Mitchell, the man who'd never lost a business deal, never backed down from a fight, never forgiven a betrayal, was already 3 moves ahead. Chapter 2. The Art of War. Tracy Mitchell stood in the master bedroom of their $4 million home, holding her phone with trembling fingers. Rob had been gone for 4 days without explanation, and her calls went straight to voicemail. Dylan paced behind her, his usually confident demeanor cracking. "Maybe he knows," Dylan said, running his hands through his perfectly styled hair. "Rich guys like him have resources. Private investigators, security teams." "Shut up," Tracy snapped. "Rob's clueless. He's probably just having another one of his midlife crisis moments. Remember when he bought that motorcycle?" But deep down, Tracy felt the shift. Rob hadn't touched her in months. She'd assumed it was stress from work. Now she wondered if there was more to it. She'd been so careful, so methodical in her planning. The affair with Dylan had started innocently enough, just sessions at the gym that turned into coffee, then lunch, then afternoon meetings at the lake house. Dylan was everything Rob wasn't. Young, attentive, passionate. He made her feel like the woman she used to be before she became Mrs. Robert Mitchell. trophy wife and mother. The plan had been simple. String Rob along until she could figure out how to maximize her divorce settlement, then disappear with Dylan to start fresh. At 45, she deserved happiness, and Dylan, at 32, gave her that. The prenup she'd signed in her early 20s was ironclad, but she'd been researching ways around it. Infidelity, mental cruelty, hidden assets. There were angles to work. Amanda arrived that evening, letting herself in with her key. At 26, she was a younger version of her mother, beautiful, manipulative, and always looking for the angle that benefited her most. She'd inherited Rob's business sense, but used it for personal gain rather than empire building. "Where's Dad?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already suspected the answer. "Working," Tracy lied smoothly. "You know how he gets when there's a big project." Amanda studied her mother's face. She'd been covering for Tracy's affair because it served her purposes. A messy divorce meant she could play both sides, extract money from both parents. She'd already started planting seeds with Rob about how Tracy deserved a generous settlement, how the family should stick together. But Rob's sudden disappearance worried her. Meanwhile, across town, Rob sat in a windowless room above Tommy's office, surrounded by surveillance equipment and legal documents. 3 divorce attorneys, the city's most ruthless, had spent the afternoon explaining Tracy's options and, more importantly, how to eliminate every single one of them. "The prenup is solid," confirmed Margaret Shunn, whose reputation for destroying cheating spouses was legendary. "But we need to be careful about how this plays out. She'll claim emotional abuse, try to invalidate the agreement. We need her to make the first move, show her true colors." Rob nodded. He'd already transferred assets, restructured business partnerships, and created legal landmines that would detonate the moment Tracy filed for divorce. But that wasn't enough. He wanted more than financial victory. He wanted total destruction. "What about Pierce?" Rob asked Tommy. Interesting background. Guy's been scamming wealthy women for years. Married 3 times, each time to clients with money. Divorced all of them within 2 years after bleeding them dry. "Your wife isn't his first victim. She's just his biggest score yet." Rob smiled for the first time in days. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "Set up a meeting with Pierce. Tell him a wealthy client wants to discuss private training sessions. Big money, exclusive arrangement." "You sure about this, Rob? Things could get messy." Rob thought about Amanda's betrayal, Tracy's calculated deception, the years of lies building up like compound interest. "They already are messy, Tommy. I'm just evening the playing field." As night fell over the city, Rob made one final call. The voice that answered was rough, professional, and expensive. "It's Mitchell. I need that favor we discussed." Chapter 3. The First Strike. Dylan Pierce drove his pristine BMW through the gates of Rob Mitchell's industrial complex, impressed despite himself. The meeting location seemed odd for discussing personal training, but wealthy clients often had quirks. The client had specified privacy above all else, and the payout promised was more than Dylan made in 6 months of regular sessions. The warehouse was dimly lit, with construction equipment scattered throughout. Dylan's confidence wavered as he realized how isolated the location was. When Rob Mitchell stepped out of the shadows, Dylan's blood turned to ice. "Mr. Pierce," Rob said calmly, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "Thank you for coming." Dylan tried to maintain his composure, but his hand shook as he extended it for a handshake that never came. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I was told a client wanted to discuss training services." "Oh, there's no misunderstanding," Rob replied, circling Dylan like a predator. "I'm a client. I've been paying for your services for months. Actually, every hotel room, every dinner, every time you've been with my wife. I've been funding your little romance." The color drained from Dylan's face. This wasn't how these confrontations usually went. In his experience, wealthy husbands either threw money at the problem or simply looked the other way. They didn't lure you to abandoned warehouses. "Look, Mr. Mitchell, I can explain." "No need," Rob interrupted. "I know exactly what you are, Pierce. You're a predator who targets vulnerable women with money. Patricia Henley in Denver took her for $200,000. Jennifer Walsh in Seattle. Left her broke and destroyed her marriage to a tech executive. Should I continue? Dylan's jaw dropped. Rob had done his homework, but more than that, he'd connected dots that law enforcement had missed. Dylan's pattern of operations across multiple states, always staying just within legal boundaries while destroying lives. I don't know what you think you know, but Rob held up a tablet, playing surveillance footage of Dylan with 3 different women in 3 different cities, all wealthy, all middle-aged, all eventually abandoned. I know you're a parasite, Pierce, but what you don't know is that I'm the wrong host to try to feed on. 2 men emerged from behind the construction equipment, not thugs, but professionals. Clean-cut, methodical, the kind of men who solve problems quietly and efficiently. Dylan recognized the type from his time in the military, before he discovered that seducing lonely wives was easier than honest work. Here's how this is going to work, Rob continued. You're going to end things with my wife. Tonight, you're going to tell her you found someone else, that you never loved her, that she was just an easy mark. You're going to break her heart so thoroughly that she'll never recover. And if I refuse, Rob smiled that cold smile again. Then my friends here will ensure that your career seducing wealthy women comes to a permanent end. They're very creative, and I'm very angry. Your choice. Dylan's military training kicked in, assessing his chances. 2 armed professionals in an isolated location, with a man who clearly had the resources to make problems disappear. The smart play was obvious. What guarantee do I have that you'll let me walk away? My word, Rob said simply. Break my wife's heart, disappear from our lives forever, and you'll never see me again. But if you ever contact her, if you ever come back to this city, if you so much as send her a Christmas card. Rob let the threat hang in the air. Dylan nodded slowly. He'd cut his losses before, moved on to easier targets. Tracy Mitchell was beautiful and wealthy, but she wasn't worth dying for. That night, Tracy's world shattered in the parking lot of their usual hotel. Dylan was cold, cruel, efficient in his rejection. He told her she was too old, too desperate, too pathetic. He laughed when she cried, told her she'd been nothing more than a midlife crisis cure for a board trainer looking for easy money. Tracy drove home in a haze of humiliation and heartbreak, not noticing the car that followed her at a distance or the cameras that documented her tears. She found Rob waiting in the living room, sipping whiskey and reading the newspaper as if nothing had happened. "How was your evening, dear?" he asked without looking up. Tracy ran upstairs without answering, locking herself in the bathroom to sob. She had no idea that this was only the beginning, that Rob's true revenge was yet to come, or that her daughter was about to learn the cost of betrayal. Chapter 4. Family Fractures. Amanda Mitchell sat in her father's penthouse office 3 days after Dylan's brutal rejection of her mother, studying Rob's face for any sign of weakness. She'd always been able to read him, to manipulate his love for her into financial advantage. But the man sitting across from her now was different, colder, more calculating. "Mom's devastated," Amanda said, playing the concerned daughter. "She won't come out of her room, won't eat. Maybe you two should talk, work things out. Marriage counseling, or something." Rob set down his coffee and looked at his daughter with eyes that seemed to see right through her. "Interesting suggestion, coming from someone who's been helping your mother deceive me for months." Amanda's practiced expression of concern faltered. "I don't know what you mean, Daddy." "Don't." Rob's voice was sharp enough to cut. "Don't call me that, and don't insult my intelligence. Tommy Russo is very thorough. I have records of every text message you sent giving your mother alibis. I know about the credit card you helped her hide, the phone you bought her specifically for communicating with Pierce. I know everything, Amanda." The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Amanda had always prided herself on being smart, on staying ahead of the game. But looking at her father now, she realized she'd been playing checkers while he'd been playing chess. "You don't understand," she said, her voice smaller now. "Mom was unhappy. You're always working, always focused on business. She needed someone to pay attention to her. So you helped her find someone?" Rob's laugh was bitter. "My own daughter, facilitating my wife's adultery. Do you have any idea what that feels like?" Amanda tried a different approach, the one that had always worked before. Tears welled in her eyes. Her voice became small and vulnerable. "I'm sorry, Daddy. I made a mistake. I just wanted Mom to be happy, and I thought maybe if you knew she was seeing someone, you'd pay more attention to her, fight for her. I never meant for it to go this far." But Rob had seen this performance too many times. The tears that had once melted his heart now only fueled his rage. "You're exactly like your mother. Everything is calculated, every emotion is performed. You didn't want her to be happy. You wanted to hedge your bets. Keep me ignorant while helping her set up her exit strategy." "That's not true." Rob opened a folder and pulled out financial records. 3 months ago, you asked me for money to expand your boutique. 50,000, you said. Emergency loan to save your business. But the business was never in trouble, was it? You needed cash to help your mother stockpile funds for her divorce. Amanda's face went white. The boutique had been her cover story, but she'd actually been helping Tracy move money into hidden accounts, preparing for the day she'd leave Rob. Amanda had skimmed 20% off the top for herself, insurance money for when the family imploded. "I have bank records, Amanda. Transactions, transfers, a paper trail that shows you've been stealing from me while helping your mother plan her escape. Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" The tears stopped. Amanda's mask finally slipped, revealing the calculating woman underneath. "So what? You've got more money than you know what to do with. Mom deserves half of everything she helped you build, and I deserve compensation for 26 years of being Robert Mitchell's daughter. Do you know what it's like living in your shadow, never being good enough, never measuring up to your precious business empire?" There it was, the truth Rob had suspected but hoped wasn't real. His daughter didn't love him. She resented him. Everything had been about money, position, advantage. "You're right," Rob said quietly. "You do deserve compensation. In fact, I've already started the process." He slid another document across the desk. "Effective immediately, you're cut off. No more allowance, no more credit cards, no more bailouts. The boutique loan? I'm calling it in. Full payment due in 30 days. Amanda grabbed the paper, scanning it frantically. "You can't do this. I'm your daughter." "Biology doesn't excuse betrayal," Rob said, standing. "You made your choice when you chose your mother's side. Now live with the consequences. Kevin will never forgive you for this." Rob's smile was cold. Kevin doesn't know about any of this yet. But when he finds out, and he'll learn the same lesson you're learning now. Actions have consequences, and I never forgive betrayal. Not from my wife, not from my daughter, not from anyone. Amanda stormed out, her heels clicking angrily on the marble floor. But Rob wasn't finished with her. Not by a long shot. He had plans for Amanda, plans that would teach her the true cost of crossing Robert Mitchell. As the elevator doors closed behind his daughter, Rob made another call. "It's time for phase 2, he said into the phone. "And this time, we're going after the whole family." Chapter 5, The Trap Springs. Kevin Mitchell was the only innocent left in the family, and Rob intended to keep it that way, at least until the boy chose his own side. At 19, Kevin was everything Rob had been at that age. Hungry, ambitious, and naive about the true nature of the people closest to him. Unlike Amanda, Kevin had never asked for handouts. He worked part-time while studying business at the state university, planning to earn his place in his father's empire rather than inherit it. That morning, Rob sat in Kevin's dorm room, watching his son pack for what he thought was a weekend trip home. Kevin had no idea that his family was imploding, that his mother was locked in her bedroom, drowning in humiliation, or that his sister was frantically trying to liquidate assets before Rob's lawyers froze everything. "Dad, you seem different lately," Kevin said, folding clothes into his duffel bag. "Mom says you're working too much, staying at the office. Everything okay?" Rob studied his youngest child, looking for signs of Tracy's manipulation or Amanda's calculation. But Kevin's concerns seemed genuine, untainted by the poison that had infected the rest of the family. "Things are changing, son," Rob said carefully. "Sometimes you discover that people aren't who you thought they were. When that happens, you have to decide what kind of man you want to be." Kevin paused his packing. "Are you and Mom having problems?" The direct question hung in the air. Rob could lie, protect Kevin's innocence a little longer, give him plausible deniability when the family war went public. Or he could tell the truth and see which side Kevin chose. Your mother has been having an affair for 6 months, Rob said quietly. Your sister knew about it and helped cover it up. They've been stealing money from me, planning to take half of everything I've built and disappear with her boyfriend. Kevin sank onto his bed, the color draining from his face. That's not possible. Mom loves you. Amanda would never. I have evidence, Kevin. Photos, bank records, text messages. Your mother and sister have been playing a long game, and I was the mark. Rob pulled out a tablet, showing Kevin the surveillance photos of Tracy and Dylan. This is who your mother really is. Kevin stared at the images, his world tilting off its axis. The photos were damning. Intimate moments between his mother and a man barely older than himself, captured with clinical precision. But worse than the betrayal was the calculation behind it, the cold planning that the evidence revealed. What are you going to do? Kevin asked, his voice barely a whisper. I'm going to destroy them, Rob said simply. Both of them. Completely. Your mother will lose everything. The house, the cars, her social standing, her future. Amanda will learn what it means to live without my protection and money. They chose to betray me, and I never forgive betrayal. Kevin looked up at his father, seeing something he'd never seen before. A ruthlessness that was both terrifying and impressive. This wasn't the father who'd taught him to ride a bike or helped with homework. This was Robert Mitchell, the businessman, the man who'd crushed competitors and built an empire through sheer force of will. What about me? Kevin asked. That's your choice, Rob said. You can stand with them, try to hold the family together, forgive and forget. If you do, you'll go down with them. Or you can stand with me and learn what it really means to be a Mitchell. The weight of the decision settled on Kevin's shoulders. He thought about his mother, probably upstairs crying over a man who'd used her and thrown her away. He thought about Amanda, always scheming, always looking for an angle. Then he looked at his father, the man who'd built everything they had, who'd given them opportunities and advantages, only to be betrayed by the people he loved most. They really did this? Kevin asked. Mom, and Amanda really betrayed you? Rob nodded. For months. While I was working to secure your future, your sister's business, your mother's lifestyle, they were planning to take it all and disappear. Kevin stood up, his decision made. Then they deserve whatever you do to them. Rob felt a mixture of pride and sadness. Kevin had chosen correctly, but that choice would change him forever. The boy who'd entered college, still believing in the fundamental goodness of family, was about to become a man who understood that loyalty was earned, not given. Good, Rob said, because I'm going to need your help. What I'm planning will require someone they trust, someone who can get close to them without raising suspicion. Kevin's eyes hardened with a resolve that reminded Rob of himself at that age. Tell me what you need me to do. Outside the dorm room window, the first snow of winter began to fall, covering the campus in pristine white. By the time it melted, the Mitchell family would be unrecognizable, and Kevin would have learned the most valuable lesson his father could teach him. In a world full of predators, you were either the hunter or the prey. Chapter 6. The Son's Gambit. Tracy Mitchell had been locked in the master bedroom for a week, surviving on the meals Kevin brought her and the pills Dr. Patel had prescribed for her nervous exhaustion. She hadn't spoken to Rob since the night Dylan destroyed her heart, hadn't even asked where her husband was spending his nights. The humiliation was too complete, too devastating. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard Dylan's cruel laughter, his words about her being desperate and pathetic. Kevin knocked softly on the door. Mom, I brought you soup. Amanda's here too. She wants to talk to you. Tracy forced herself to sit up, to look presentable for her children. They were all she had left now. Rob's coldness, his absence, told her everything she needed to know about their marriage. But her children still loved her, still needed her. Amanda entered first, her face drawn with worry that seemed genuine. She'd spent the past week trying to access the accounts she'd helped Tracy set up, only to discover that Rob had frozen everything. Her boutique was failing without his financial backing, and her creditors were circling like vultures. But she couldn't tell her mother about any of that. Not yet. Mom, you have to get up, Amanda said, sitting on the edge of the bed. Dad's planning something. He's moved out of the house, he's not answering my calls, and Kevin says he's been staying at the office. Kevin entered with a tray of food, his expression carefully neutral. He'd spent the week learning to lie to his mother and sister, to play the role of a loyal son, while secretly reporting everything back to Rob. It was harder than he'd expected, but his father had taught him that business and war required sacrifices. He knows, Tracy whispered, finally giving voice to her fear. He knows about Dylan. Amanda and Kevin exchanged glances. Kevin's was calculated. Amanda's was panicked. "What are you talking about?" Amanda asked, but her voice lacked conviction. Tracy looked at her daughter, seeing the guilt written across her face. "You know too, don't you? Both of you know." Kevin sat down carefully, playing his part. "Mom, I don't understand. What about Dylan?" But Amanda couldn't maintain the charade. The stress of the past week, the financial pressure, the realization that Rob was systematically dismantling their lives. It all came pouring out. "He has photos," Amanda said. "Dad confronted me with evidence. He knows about the affair, about the money, about everything. And he's cutting us off, Mom. All of us." Tracy felt the world tilt around her. "Photos." Kevin reached into his jacket and pulled out a tablet, part of his assignment from Rob. "I'm sorry, Mom. I think you need to see this." The surveillance footage was devastating. Not just the intimate moments with Dylan, but also meetings with divorce attorneys, conversations with Amanda about hiding assets, discussions about how to maximize her settlement. Rob had been watching, recording, building a case while she thought she was being clever. "Oh God," Tracy breathed. "How long has he known?" "Weeks, maybe months," Kevin said. "Mom, he's not just angry. He's planning something bigger. Something that's going to destroy all of us if we don't get ahead of it." Amanda leaned forward. "What do you mean?" Kevin looked at his sister with carefully crafted concern. "Dad's not just talking about divorce. He's talking about criminal charges. Theft, fraud, conspiracy. He has lawyers, investigators, people who specialize in making problems disappear." This was the lie Rob had instructed Kevin to tell, the fear he wanted to plant in their minds. Let them think he was planning to have them arrested, prosecuted, destroyed through legal channels. Let them focus their defenses in the wrong direction. "He can't do that," Amanda said, but uncertainty crept into her voice. "Can he?" "He's Robert Mitchell," Kevin replied. "He owns half the politicians in this city, has judges on his payroll, controls more money than most small countries. If he wants us in prison, we'll go to prison." Tracy's hand shook as she processed this new threat. It wasn't enough that Dylan had humiliated her, that her marriage was over, that her comfortable life was crumbling. Now Rob wanted to destroy her completely, send her to prison for crimes that felt justified at the time. "What do we do?" she whispered. Kevin stood up, pacing the room like his father. "We have to get out ahead of this. File for divorce first, claim abuse, mental cruelty. Make Dad look like the villain before he can make us look like the criminals." "But the prenup," Amanda started. "Fuck the prenup," Kevin said with surprising vehemence. "We'll claim it was signed under duress, that Dad threatened Mom if she didn't sign. We'll paint him as a controlling monster who drove you to seek comfort elsewhere." Tracy looked at her son with something approaching hope. Kevin had always been the level-headed one, the one who thought things through. If anyone could find a way out of this nightmare, it was him. "You think that would work?" she asked. Kevin nodded confidently, playing his role perfectly. "But we have to move fast, before Dad files his own papers, before he can control the narrative. And we need to stick together, all three of us, united against him." What Tracy and Amanda didn't know was that every word of their conversation was being recorded, that Kevin was wearing a wire, that their desperate planning session would be played back in Rob's office within the hour. They were walking deeper into the trap Rob had set, and Kevin was the bait that made it irresistible. As the family huddled together, planning their doomed rebellion, Rob sat in his office across town, listening to their every word and smiling his cold smile. Soon, very soon, they would learn the price of betraying Robert Mitchell. Chapter 7. The Reckoning Begins. The divorce papers Amanda filed on her mother's behalf were works of fiction, painting Rob as an abusive monster who controlled every aspect of Tracy's life through financial manipulation and psychological torture. The media ate it up. Wealthy businessman's wife finally finds courage to escape his tyrannical control, seeks protection from courts after years of silent suffering. Rob's phone buzzed with calls from reporters, business partners, and social contacts, all wanting to know his side of the story. But Rob stayed silent, let the narrative build, let Tracy and Amanda believe they were winning. Meanwhile, his real lawyers, not the ones who'd advised Kevin to recommend this strategy, prepared for war. 3 days after the filing, Rob's response hit the family like a precision strike. Not just a counterfiling, but a complete legal bombardment that revealed the depth of his preparation and the extent of their miscalculation. Amanda was the first to feel the impact. She arrived at her boutique that morning to find it locked, seized by federal marshals executing a court order. The business she'd built with Rob's money, which she'd used as a front for laundering funds stolen from her father, was now evidence in a criminal investigation. Fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy to commit theft, the lead marshal explained, handing her the warrant. You have the right to remain silent. Tracy watched the arrest on the noon news, her hands shaking as the reporter detailed the charges against her daughter. Illegal financial transfers, hidden accounts, systematic theft from family businesses. The crimes carried sentences of up to 20 years in federal prison. But that was just the opening move. The real devastation came when Tracy opened her laptop and found that every social media account, every email address, every digital presence she maintained for 2 decades had been compromised. Photos of her affair with Dylan were posted everywhere. Not just the intimate moments, but the planning sessions, the discussions about stealing from Rob, the cruel laughter about how easy it was to deceive her pathetic husband. Her friends, her social circle, her charity organizations. Everyone saw Tracy Mitchell for what she really was. Not a victim of an abusive marriage, but a calculating adulteress who'd been caught red-handed. The narrative she'd tried to control was obliterated in a matter of hours. Kevin called that evening, his voice filled with panic that was only partially feigned. Mom, you need to get out of the house. Dad's not just going after Amanda. He's coming for both of us. What do you mean? Tracy asked, though she was already packing, driven by an instinct that told her to run. I think he's been planning this for months. The divorce filing, Amanda's arrest, it's all connected. He let us make the first moves so he could claim we were the aggressors. Now he's going to destroy us completely. Tracy's paranoia, fed by guilt and genuine fear, made Kevin's lies seem like truth. She'd underestimated Rob, thought his love for his family would make him weak. But the man systematically dismantling her life wasn't weak. He was terrifyingly strong. Where can we go? She asked. I have a plan, Kevin said. Meet me at the lake house. We'll figure out our next move from there. The lake house, the scene of her affair, the place where Rob's investigators had gathered their most damning evidence. Tracy's mind was too fractured to see the symbolism, to recognize the trap. She was running on pure survival instinct now, and that instinct told her to trust her son. As Tracy's car pulled out of the driveway for the last time, Rob watched from the security feed in his office. She looked broken, defeated, exactly as he'd intended. But this wasn't the end. This was barely the beginning. He turned to Tommy Russo, who'd been documenting every phase of the operation. Is everything ready at the lake house? Cameras, microphones, the works, Tommy confirmed. Plus your special guest should be arriving right about now. Rob's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Tracy thought she was running to safety, to the comfort of her son's protection. Instead, she was walking into the most carefully orchestrated confrontation of her life, one that would strip away her last illusions and force her to confront the true cost of her betrayal. The lake house waited in the darkness, and with it, the final act of Robert Mitchell's revenge. Chapter 8. The Lake House Confrontation. Tracy arrived at the lake house as the sun set over the water, painting the sky blood red. The building looked different in the dying light, ominous rather than romantic, a monument to her stupidity rather than her secret happiness. Every window seemed to watch her. Every shadow seemed to hide an observer. Kevin's car was already in the driveway, but something felt wrong. The lights were on inside, but she could see figures moving that didn't match her son's silhouette. Her survival instinct screamed at her to run, but she had nowhere left to go. Her bank accounts were frozen, her credit cards canceled, her social circle destroyed. Kevin was all she had left. She knocked on the door she'd once entered with Dylan's key, and Kevin answered with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mom, thank God you made it. Come in, we need to talk." Tracy stepped inside and froze. Rob sat in the living room armchair like a king holding court, flanked by Tommy Russo and two other men she didn't recognize. But it was the fourth figure that made her blood turn to ice. Dylan Pierce, bound to a chair with duct tape over his mouth, his face a mess of bruises and terror. "Hello, Tracy," Rob said calmly. "So good of you to join us. Please sit down." Tracy looked at Kevin, confusion and betrayal warring in her expression. "Kevin, what is this?" "This is education," Rob answered before Kevin could speak. "For all of us. Kevin, tell your mother what you've learned this past week." Kevin's mask finally slipped completely, revealing the cold calculation he'd inherited from his father. "I learned that loyalty has to be earned, Mom, and that you never earn mine." The words hit Tracy like physical blows. Her baby, her youngest child, the one she'd thought still loved her unconditionally, had been working against her all along. "Kevin, please," she whispered. "Please what?" Kevin's voice was harder than she'd ever heard it. "Please forgive you for cheating on Dad. Please ignore the fact that you and Amanda tried to steal from the man who gave us everything. Please pretend that you didn't laugh about how pathetic he was while you were fucking your trainer." Rob watched the confrontation with satisfaction. Kevin's transformation was complete, from naive boy to ruthless man in the span of a week. The betrayal had forged him in the same fires that had once forged Rob himself. "Sit down, Tracy," Rob said again, his voice carrying the authority of a man who'd never learned to accept no for an answer. Tracy sank onto the couch, her eyes fixed on Dylan. His muffled sounds through the tape were desperate, terrified. Whatever had happened to him before she arrived had broken something fundamental inside him. "Do you know what Mr. Pierce told me when I asked him about you?" Rob asked conversationally. "He said you were pathetic. A desperate middle-aged woman throwing herself at a man young enough to be her son. He said fucking you was like doing charity work, unpleasant but profitable." Each word was a carefully placed knife, designed to cut deep and leave scars. Tracy's face crumpled, but Rob wasn't finished. "But that's not the worst part," he continued. "The worst part is that he was right. You were pathetic. A woman who had everything. A husband who loved her, children who respected her, a life of luxury and comfort. And threw it all away for what? A few hours with a professional con man who saw you as nothing more than a paycheck." "Rob, please." Tracy tried to speak, but he cut her off. 23 years of marriage, Tracy. 23 years of building something together, of trusting you, of believing that we were partners. And you repaid that trust by planning my destruction while smiling to my face every morning. Rob stood up, walking to the window that overlooked the lake. "This house was supposed to be our retreat, our private sanctuary. Instead, you turned it into a brothel, defiled every room with your betrayal. Do you have any idea what that feels like?" Tracy was crying now, but Rob felt no sympathy. Those tears were for herself, for her situation, not for the pain she'd caused. "But here's what you never understood about me, Tracy. I don't forgive. I don't forget. And I don't show mercy to people who betray me." He turned back to face her, his eyes empty of any warmth or love. "Not even family." Tommy stepped forward, handing Rob a tablet. "The transfer is complete, boss. Everything's been moved to the offshore accounts." Rob nodded, then looked at Kevin. "Son, would you like to tell your mother what's happened to her future?" Kevin's smile was his father's smile, cold, victorious, final. "All of it, Mom. Every account you set up, every asset you try to hide, every penny you thought you'd stolen. Dad found it all, and now it's gone. You have nothing left." Tracy looked around the room at the men who held her life in their hands. Her husband, her son, and the professionals who did their dirty work. She was completely alone, completely powerless, completely destroyed. What are you going to do to me?" she whispered. Rob's answer was simple, final, and absolutely terrifying. Everything. Chapter 9. The Price of Betrayal. The final phase of Rob's revenge unfolded with the precision of a military operation. Tracy's destruction wasn't just financial or social. It was complete erasure from the life she'd known. The woman who'd once commanded respect at charity galas and country club luncheons ceased to exist, replaced by a cautionary tale whispered about in the circles she'd once ruled. Amanda's trial became front-page news, her desperate attempts to claim innocence crumbling under the weight of evidence Rob had methodically gathered. The jury saw the bank transfers, heard the recorded conversations, watched surveillance footage of her systematically looting her father's businesses. The 20-year sentence was announced on a Tuesday morning, and Amanda was led away in shackles while photographers captured every moment of her humiliation. Tracy attended the sentencing alone, her request for reconciliation with Kevin ignored, her pleas to Rob for mercy met with cold silence. She'd sold everything of value, jewelry, clothes, even the car, to pay for Amanda's defense attorney, but hadn't mattered. Rob's evidence was overwhelming, his legal team ruthless in their prosecution. Dylan Pierce had disappeared entirely after that night at the lake house. Some said he'd left the state. Others whispered darker possibilities. Rob never confirmed or denied the rumors, but his smile when asked about Dylan's whereabouts told everyone what they needed to know about the price of crossing Robert Mitchell. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, Tracy worked as a night shift clerk at a gas station on the wrong side of town. The prenup had held up perfectly, leaving her with nothing but the clothes on her back and the memories of a life she'd thrown away. Her reflection in the store's security mirror showed a woman aged beyond her years, worn down by consequences she'd never imagined possible. Kevin visited her once, not out of love, but to deliver his father's final message. "He wants you to know it's over," Kevin said, standing by the register where his mother counted cigarette packs for minimum wage. "You can stop looking over your shoulder, stop waiting for the next shoe to drop. His revenge is complete." Tracy looked at her son, tall, confident, wearing a suit that cost more than she made in 3 months. Rob had promoted Kevin to vice president of operations, fast-tracking him through the business world as a reward for his loyalty during the family war. "Do you ever think about what we used to be?" Tracy asked. "When you were little, when we were happy." Kevin's expression didn't change. "We were never happy, Mom. We were just good at pretending. The difference is that now we don't have to pretend anymore." He left without saying goodbye, and Tracy knew she'd never see him again. The son she'd raised, who'd once needed bedtime stories and goodnight kisses, was gone forever, replaced by his father's protege. Rob himself never spoke to Tracy again. She'd glimpse him occasionally in news reports or business magazines, usually announcing another acquisition or charitable donation. He'd remarried within 2 years, a younger woman from a good family who understood the value of loyalty and the price of betrayal. They had children together, a new family built on the ruins of the old one. On cold nights, when the gas station was empty and Tracy had nothing but her thoughts for company, she'd remember the moment she'd decided to betray her marriage. It had seemed so simple then, so justified. Rob worked too much, paid too little attention, took her for granted. Dylan offered excitement, passion, the feeling of being desired rather than merely tolerated. But she'd misunderstood the man she'd married. Rob's love hadn't made him weak, it had made him vulnerable. And when that vulnerability was exploited, when his trust was betrayed, he'd become something far more dangerous than she'd ever imagined possible. The gas station security cameras captured her tears, just as other cameras had once captured her laughter with Dylan. But there was no one left to see her pain, no one left to care about her regrets. She'd chosen her path when she'd chosen to betray the one man who'd loved her unconditionally, and now she was walking that path alone. Robert Mitchell had taught his family the most valuable lesson he knew, that betrayal always comes with a price, and that price is always more than the betrayer can afford to pay. Tracy Mitchell paid that price every day, in the reflection of security mirrors and the memory of everything she'd lost. Some mistakes can be forgiven. Some betrayals can be overcome. But some choices echo forever, and Robert Mitchell had made sure that Tracy's choice would echo for the rest of her life. A reminder that in a world of predators and prey, she'd chosen to be prey, and he'd chosen to be the hunter who never forgot, never forgave, and never stopped until the hunt was complete. The price of betrayal was everything, and Tracy Mitchell had paid it in full. And there you have